We have part 2 of separating games from reality. The term sportsmanship can be perverted. I've seen it perverted as that's not the way to play the game. That is, about how the game assets are employed, not how the players behave, but how the game assets are employed, so that certain things are not supposed to be done even though it's within the rules. And I, of course, say, who says it's not? It's in the rules. Who says it's not? People who think they know better. Now, some of this comes from flaws in the games. There are designers who themselves expect people to employ their assets in the game a certain way, but they don't design the game to require or encourage that. Well, that's not smart, and that's a kind thing to say. As far as I'm concerned, let's face it, it's kind of foolish, dumb. Dull. If you don't want people to behave a certain way, don't allow it in the rules. Here's some examples. I talked to somebody who had been playing a railroad game at a tournament at a convention. In railroad games, completing routes is vital. So this player waited until another player had almost completed a route and then blocked it. The other player said, but that's not how to play the game. The blocker said, but it's within the rules. And of course, that's the way he generally played. They didn't care. They ganged up on him to eliminate him. That's not the way to play the game, but it was in the rules. Even in Monopoly, if you've ever played Monopoly and been required by family, for example, to make a trade to help someone else who's having a hard time, then that's more of, this is how you should play the game. But it's not in the rules. And I think a lot of this comes from busybodies. Much of the desire to insert morality into games, or insert that's the way you should do it, derives from political correctness, which is the tyranny of the majority, or often actually a minority, trying to force everyone to be the same, to conform. Now, we live in a century when a great many people think they know how everyone else should behave, which is the fuel of political correctness. It shows up in games in trying to impose morality on games. Now, I've lived most of my life in the last century where we still gave people room to do things their own way, within much broader limits than are now regarded as correct by many people. And we've got to the point where free speech doesn't seem to be free anymore. Don't misunderstand. I don't advocate bad behavior in games, but I think it's the right of the players if the game allows it. So let's take, for example, the game Diplomacy. Diplomacy is a game with rules that explicitly encourage cheating and backstabbing. Now, I've already said, I think if you cheat, then you've broken the whole idea of the game as separate from reality. So I never approved of cheating, even in Diplomacy where the rules encouraged it. But when I played Postal Diplomacy in the 70s, and I was very successful at it, I took the road of absolute truth so that when someone heard something from me, they knew it was true. And over time, that worked. I had to rely on a superior strategic sense to win the game, but I was content with a draw if I couldn't win, because to me a draw is a partial win. Not everybody thinks that in Diplomacy. But I didn't morally disapprove of backstabbing and lying. I just thought my way worked better. So I was doing something that was actually against the spirit of the rules, but was within the rules. And it worked. Then take the game Train, which Brenda Romero designed. It was a much discussed, visually oriented tabletop game. Handmade, not sold. She made one copy at a time. She gave one to a museum and made another copy. It involved actual railway cars and model railway tracks with pawns representing people. And the idea was you filled those railway cars up by playing cards or something like that. And then when you successfully delivered to wherever you were going, you were told that the people were being delivered to a World War II concentration camp. Now, some people thought this was a moral coup of some kind. I thought it was pointless. It's a game. We're in the magic circle. It doesn't matter what it's supposed to represent. So my reaction probably would have been something like, so what? I'm playing a game and playing according to the rules. Did I succeed? Now, that doesn't mean there aren't games that I wouldn't even consider playing. Prison Bitch, for example, was a game that was actually banned at the Origins Game Fair one year. And you can imagine what that was about. It's not one that attracted me. There are many games that I wouldn't play because I find them distasteful, but I don't regard them as immoral, just as distasteful. To me, discussing morality in games is itself a game of sorts, and in a way, talking about morality in a game is nonsense because it's separate from the real world. So to me, Train is a pretentious one-off trick with a simple game attached. But lots of people have a different idea about Train. They thought it was great. However, I think video game people have to consider this. If morality actually matters in games, then video game fans are really in trouble, with so many games involving graphic depictions of violent death and violent solutions to problems. If morality matters, then the claims that video games encourage violent behavior might well be correct. But to me, if you can't separate games from reality, you're losing touch with reality.